All right, let's talk about the Philadelphia Eagles doing what the Philadelphia Eagles do and having what I think is a really strong draft. Seems like every year we're looking at this saying they have a really strong draft, and seemingly every year they do have a really strong draft. Who remains to be seen exactly what will happen this year, of course. But kind of the first two picks being the key ones here, the ones that we're all going to talk about. And again, when you have you pick 22 and pick 40, a lot of times that is going to be what your draft comes down to, especially when your next pick isn't until 94. Kind of do want to nail those, and I think they nailed those. Again, you have guys like Bradbury and Slay who, Bradbury's whole career has been up and down. So even though he's coming off a down year, there is reason to believe he could have more of an up year. It could happen. And for a guy like, Slay, I actually didn't think he was bad last year. He just wasn't what he typically is. I think he's all right still, still a good corner. But they wanted to get improvement there. And Mitchell will probably be more of an outside guy, fill that Bradbury role if they don't feel like Bradbury can be kind of the number one guy anymore. And Cooper, DeJohn, or DeJean. Still haven't figured it out. At this point, I guess I just never will. I'm making the choice not to know exactly if it's DeJohn or DeJean. But DeJean is someone who I do think can be a really effective player. I think he's not necessarily just a pure outside guy. So I do think that they fill different roles. People always, again, football is so weird where there's positions, but there's also positions within positions, right? And, for a corner, it's not like everyone is just an outside corner. DeJean's someone who can do several different things for the Eagles, and I do think could be a unique fit for them. So again, how is this all going to work out? I don't know, but hey, when you have enough secondary players, go out and get some more. Like, they used to always say in baseball, when you have enough pitchers, go out and get more. I feel like it's that way with secondary. And again, I should set up what this chart is. If you haven't, this is your first draft recap video you're seeing. The way it works is the number all the way to the left is when that player was selected. The next number over is when they were projected to go, and then you have their name and their position. And you see DeJohn and Mitchell were both projected to go a lot earlier than they ended up going. So getting a couple steals on top of it in positions of need, yeah, that's a good draft right off the bat. But there's a lot more picks than just those two. They actually had a good amount of picks in this draft, which is also always a good thing when you can get, nearly double-digit picks. They had 9 selections. The average team has 8, but still, getting more is always good because of comp picks and everything. That's why the average team has 8. They go with Jackson Hunt, an edge rusher who's a unique player. He's definitely a bit of a raw prospect, and he's someone who might need some coaching, but I also don't think they're expecting to have him go right away. He's someone who is a bit of an analytics darling. A lot of analytics people like him because he has the explosiveness, he has the power, and you just hope that you can coach him up. And his numbers were still pretty good. Like his advanced numbers were still pretty good. That's why some people love him. For example, he was drafted at 94. He was 134th on the consensus big board, but PFF's big board had him at 86, who tends to view things a little bit more analytically inclined, the same way the Eagles do. So that's why I can kind of understand why they would, why that happens. So that's interesting. So still, again, I usually do say that if you want to draft closer to the consensus big board than the other way around, but still, there's plenty of reason to get excited about Hunt and what he can do, just being a really explosive pass rusher off the edge. Will Shipley, a running back, so I guess the Eagles, they're not just wanting Saquon Barkley. I think it's weird because I feel like, Shipley, people talk about him as like, well, maybe a running back too. Maybe he is this sort of the backup back who can come in on third downs and things like that. Well, you're not going to have him play third downs because he can't block. So I don't know why people talk about him that way. I think that he is kind of more of a. That's the issue I have with him. I'm not a crazy fan of Will Shipley as a running back. It's also not a position of need. This is a bit of a misfire for my personal opinion, even though, that I disagree with the consensus. Most people say this is a fine pick, getting him at here. He was supposed to go 130th, getting him at 127th. So at least, there, because of that, I'm not going to crush the pick because, again, most people agree with this selection. I'm just not one of them. And you're watching the video in part to hear my opinions on it, so I'm giving them to you. You didn't have Aeneas Smith, a receiver. They attacked the receiver position a couple of times in this draft class, going with Smith here, who is, essentially, so he got hurt in 2022, and his tape was not as strong in 2023. And so this is maybe a potential buy low on Smith. So he's, at the mid 100s at this point, but could be still an effective slot receiver, which really is something this Eagles need. And I think they, again, we'll talk about Johnny Wilson in a second, but I do think they want to kind of attack that over the middle of the field more and just to get the wide receiver depth better a little bit, because you have obviously AJ Brown and Devonta Smith, who are great, but you have Dallas Goedert, who's also great, but you kind of wanted more depth there. So I think this could help do that. Next up, they got a guy who I really like this pick a lot. It's one of my favorite kind of late picks we saw in this draft class. Jeremiah Trotter Jr., who was, again, projected to go 94th. They get him at 155, so you kind of have the reverse of the Jackson Hunt situation a little bit. But Trotter is someone who did make my top 5 linebackers list. He's someone who did fall, which sometimes you see with linebackers. People look for different things. And listen, I get why people are maybe not as high on Trotter as the consensus is. I totally do. He doesn't have the elite physical traits. He doesn't have that elite athleticism. And he is a smaller guy, and you can tell on film he looks like a smaller guy. But again, there's something to be said about a guy who can just fundamentally come in and play the linebacker position pretty well. And for the Eagles, that might be what they need. And, they went out and they added Devin White, and Eagles fans and I argued about however, we view that to be a good move or not. But, I think someone like Trotter can almost be the anti-Devin White in the sense of Devin White will give you the splash plays, but doesn't kind of maybe lacks consistency. So it could be a situation where when you're like, hey, we're up 14 points, we just don't want to give up a big play. Let's, put Trotter out there. And then when it's, hey, we're down 14 points, we need a big play. Let's throw out Devin White and see if he can, give us a splash play. If our defense is getting torched, maybe we'll throw out the playmaker. And then when our defense is doing all right, we'll get the guy who's more consistent. It makes you more versatile. I think he's just kind of a steal as well. So I like that. They got a couple of interior offensive linemen, both listed at guard. I think McMahon also plays center, but, we can talk about them both. Neither have particularly strong analytics, and both kind of have the same issues of, not kind of the elite strength. These are two guys I didn't evaluate personally, but I did when I was doing, my research for this video, spent a decent amount of research on these guys. And, doesn't seem like they have the, elite traits or anything like that, but just have some traits that make them NFL quality. I think these are depth pieces. I think both of these are simply, hey, offensive linemen get injured. We want to be able to be sure up the depth, which is, I like doing that more than the teams that spend these picks just on special teamers, right? At least these guys might come in and play. The guy I skipped over, who I want to spend some time on, is Johnny Wilson, the wide receiver out of Florida State, who I get why he fell. I totally do. I believe I had him as a top 50 prospect. Maybe not. Maybe I think he was there, though. Not high on the list, but I like Johnny Wilson. I get why he falls, though, because, again, he's 6'7". He doesn't have great hands, and it's kind of a unique. It's one of those players where it's like he has great traits, but what position do those traits get you? And it's certainly, a lot of times what happens is you get one of these guys who it's like, okay, he's a, really unique player, but how does he fit in? A lot of times it ends up being they don't fit in and they're not NFL ready. That does happen. And there's just no place for someone like Johnny Wilson. That being said, it's also fair to say, this guy moves really well. I made a whole film study on him. He can make the occasional great catch, for pick 185, this is a huge steal. He was projected to go 112, so I don't, I think it's worth the risk for someone like Johnny Wilson, even though I get why he fell to some degree. I get why he was projected to go 112, for example, but 185. I mean, again, these, you're seeing him getting drafted with backup offensive linemen and special teams guys. I'm like, why not get a guy who, if he works, could be a legit starter, good wide receiver? There's way more value in that, in my opinion. It's worth the risk there. So yeah, really strong draft. Didn't agree with every pick, but I agreed with most of them, and even the ones I didn't agree with, I understood. So yeah, really strong draft by the Eagles. I don't do grades, but this would be an A if I did grades. Really good stuff. But yeah, that's what I think. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from y'all, and of course, as always, thanks for watching.